In Outsiders, we got Amplifying Arrow, a really cool card, at least in concept, but it doesn't really have math on its side. And since consistently efficient cards are the ones that usually find their way into competitive play, Amplifying Arrow becomes one of those cards that just begs for a janky combo deck to be built around it. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast for, that's right, kind of a crazy fun one tonight. Talking about Amplifying Arrow, which, you know, we've talked about it before. It's not the best card out there. There's a lot of things not going great for it, but it's a very interesting card in terms of what it could do. And shout out to my friend Dozer. He was on here before, and he was like, all we need is like a forked lightning type pump for Amplifying Arrow. And he's right. That would be very interesting. So wanted to kind of talk about the card tonight and look around at what would be needed for a strong combo deck. And then kind of at the end, I'm going to throw one of my crazy proposals to you, which I'm sure my Timmies out there will think is a horrible deck, but they'll still try it and try to get that win, I think. All right, so Amplifying Arrow, why is it bad? I mean, there's a couple things not going well for it. The first of being which that it's a yellow, right? So I'll kind of revisit that here in a second. So Amplifying Arrow, while it's face up in any zone, if it would gain attack, it gains that much +1. Now, that's not really that big of a deal, the face-up part, but it could be. It means that, by and large, you're not going to store it in your arsenal. You're going to want to have to load it in your arsenal. Now, that comes relevant for bows, the ones that give +1 and all that. But the arrow itself is yellow for 2, which means that it's below curve, right? Most 0-4s are the red versions, which makes 0-3s the yellow versions. That's the on curve for arrows, except that those cards also generally do something or have an on hit or something like that. Now, Amplifying Arrow obviously it's below because when you load it the first time with a bow that gives +1, that gets you back on curve. So that's why I say this card is really begging for a quote-unquote combo type deck with it, because you don't actually get your value out of it until the second pump, and you're not going to really get utility value out of it until the third pump. And what I mean by that part is this is a yellow arrow, and typically, if you're playing, right, look at the way we build our decks, especially ranger type decks, generally the arrows you're going to be firing off are intended to be the red arrows, right? So this being a yellow, which sure, yellow cards help us with pitch, but by and large, you would really want this to be a red 0-3 instead of being a yellow 0-2, right? Kind of following that trend, or at least that logic. Now, that said, once we start getting that second, third, or even fourth pump on there, things start getting pretty crazy. Now, I do want to throw up the release notes and how this works with Amplifying Arrow. That, remember, a lot of these attacks that say your next arrow attack gains or your next card from Arsenal gains, like Premeditate, those would indeed apply to Amplifying Arrow because it's being played at face up in any zone. As such, if you started with a card in Arsenal, you could then have as many as 3 other pumps in hand, of course, Amplifying Arrow being your 4th card. So you have 4 pumps for +3, and then +1 each, and then you have the bow load for +1, and then another +1, bringing you to a total of 20 damage. And of course, 20 damage is nothing to sneeze at. That said, that's why tonight's discussion, we are completely focusing on Blitz, because if you're going to pull this off, you're going to want to pull it off pretty early to put them in range, and then continue to apply the pressure. So moving on to our PTI style discussion, let's talk about the best bow for this. Now, Death Stealer and Shiver both have very interesting effects here, right? The card draw off Death Dealer obviously is really good from a pump standpoint, but Death Dealer doesn't give the +1, and if you're paying the 1, it seems to me that you'd kind of want that on-demand pump, because that 1 becomes effectively 2. Now, again, I get it, if you're drawing into a pump card, that's all win, But I do think that it probably just makes sense to use one of the +1 bows. The reason I don't like Shiver in this case is to actually, I mean, the Dominate is actually crazy good, right? Could be crazy good in this case, but then you're missing out on your +1. We have Voltaire on there, which is a perfectly good option if we're using Lexi. Barbed Castaway is fine. There's no real reason that I see of to spend the extra resources to give this the aim counter. And then there's Dreadbore, which I just kind of like. I kind of like in this case. Again, it's +1, and then you have the static effect. So Dreadbore is the one I'm going to be looking at. Obviously, if you were running this with Lexi, you have an obvious decision there, or an obvious choice there, I should say. The argument for Death Dealer, again, is real, but I think missing out on that on-demand +1 is a big deal. All right, now let's go ahead and talk heroes here. So Azalea, love her, but she doesn't seem to be the right choice for this because you're going to really want to wait until you have that card in hand or have access to a way to get that card in hand. Getting the on-demand Dominate would be great, but you'd have to essentially Memorial Ground it or something like that, which is, to be fair, like a pure combo play that you could try to do, but I think you're really going to want to try and get that in on the early ones. Riptide is very interesting to me. I'm going to come to him in a second. Now let's talk Lexi. Lexi is actually a great choice with this because she has the elemental stuff. Also, if she's running New Horizons, she can easily flip cards over to give you a second arsenal slot, which could, in potential high value land, get you another pump on the arrow, which is pretty cool. She also has access to some of the elemental stuff that will let you pump and get Dominate because, again, we're going to be trying to get to +1 on the load. And if you can pump and give Dominate with like a fuse or something like that, that's actually not too shabby, right? Now, Riptide, the reason I've been looking at him is because what we're trying to do is set up a combo. And what can Riptide do? He can stall and ping damage, get a couple 5-6 damage in over the course while we're setting that up. And then maybe when they're coming in for our 20-ish arrow, that becomes a much bigger threat if they're sitting at 13, 14, 15, 16, whatever it may be, kind of in those mid-teens. That's a big deal as opposed to them still sitting at the 20 that they started with. So Riptide is where my focus has been on this. But that said, the combo stuff with Lexi is real, and she can also just do other arrows to continue to put on pressure while you're building. And I think that's not a horrible idea. But again, you have Riptide's reload, and his traps are not irrelevant. Right, now let's talk just real quick about headpieces. Okay, so the other part of, as I mentioned, Lexi with New Horizons is not irrelevant, right? Can potentially get you another slot. But we have Mask of Malicious, I still cannot say that. The mask, right? The blood mask, blood face mask, whatever it is. All right, this one, for one, lets you effectively go tutor the card out. Okay, so that's pretty good because we can essentially, like in the Riptide build I'm talking about, you can essentially do traps and stuff, and when you do draw into that essentially all pump hand, pop your chest piece, talk about that in a second too, pop your chest piece, swap out the one undesirable card, and then go. Now you only get that once, to be fair, but being able to just pull it out on him, could you imagine? Heck, it's, we're trying to go for a combo thing. Could you imagine if turn 0 or turn 1, you just suddenly have 4 pumps in hand? Why not go, right? That's a pretty big attack. So I'm leaning towards the Mask of Malicious Manifestations, I did it, being the right choice in this case. But again, let me know your feedback below. Again, don't get me wrong, the space for another pump or something else, right, is not a horrible idea. Right now, the combo that I see at hand is, well, where's that resource for the mask coming from? Well, I think we start with Blossom because, again, you don't want to wait for Tunic to have to be up and all this stuff. If you want the resource, you want to go. And then we also have Bullseye's Bracers, which is the ability to load the arrow in at a +1, right? Face up. So, since that's free, and it effectively does the same thing as our bow that we would have paid the 1 and 2, right? So Blossom we could pop for our bow, but we could also pop Blossom to get us the resource we need for the mask, and then load in with Bullseye, getting that +1. So you really maintain hand integrity because you don't have to pitch. You maintain the card, you maintain the resource curve. So that's kind of the little combo that I see here, right? Is Blossom, Bullseye with the mask. But again, you can always just, if you have it in hand, you can always just pop Blossom and pay Dreadbore. Because again, we're going to be playing a whole bunch of 0-3 pumps. I mean, that's just basic stuff there, right? 0-3 pumps. We're going to go with reds in that case. We're not going to want to spend a card from hand to pitch because we're going to want to maximize our hand. So it makes complete sense to just have that on-demand resource, which is very, very clearly Blossom of Spring. All right, so what I've ended up coming up with, kind of showing my deck across the screen right now. I to be honest with you guys, it's low confidence deck. I've played a couple rounds with it and I've lost them all, but I've gotten the arrow to 20. I have done it. So a lot of you out there who are better at designing and piloting these, jank combo type decks, I'm sure you can have a lot of fun with it. I will, of course, put the list below. But what I'm basically doing here with Riptide, we're playing traps, we're playing stall tactic, and we're basically just trying to ping, stay alive until we can set up that hand where we've got 1 in arsenal, 4 in hand, 3 in hand, and some wild card. Either it's our arrow, or it's not. It's our arrow, or it's a trap, and then we swap it out with the mask, and then we go to town, and then you hope you've got enough pings in. That's basically your strategy. But again, I'd love to see deck lists below. Let me know what you folks have been doing with Amplifying Arrow. There's no real doubt that it's not today, it's not really a competitively viable card. But again, this card screams for a combo deck. So let me know what you folks are doing. Like I said, silly cast. Thanks for joining me. If nothing else, folks, go Commando.